What's up, guys? It's April 9th, 2020. I'm your host, What's His Face, and if you haven't already, please give a like and subscribe down below. In today's video, unfortunately, we're going to be going over a few more of the things that the president has been dishonest about. We're going to take a look at examples of doublespeak, walking back your statements, and in some cases, just flat out denying what he meant by what he said. Thank you for watching. This is Inspiring Inquiry.
See these memos that reportedly Peter Navarro wrote back in January. When did you see them, and how does these memos sort of square with what you've often said that nobody could have predicted this? It sounds like he was predicting.
I didn't see him, but I heard he wrote some memos talking about pandemic. I didn't see him. I didn't look for him either. But that was about the same time as I felt that we should do it. That was about the same time that I closed it down. Nobody said it's going to happen, but there is a possibility. There always has been a possibility, but people wouldn't talk about it. But it was right about the time that I closed it down.
Well, as you see it wasn't brought to his attention and he didn't look for it. So I don't know if it was incompetence or negligence, and I'm not sure what he was implying by the fact that it happened around the same time. Like it didn't matter whether it got to him or not. I don't know. In this next portion, one of the reporters asks him, at this time is exactly when he was downplaying it. This is when he walks back those statements. He sidesteps the question by deflecting to something else. And then he gives us the example of doublespeak, where he says that he's a cheerleader, which is a nice way of saying that he lied to everyone.
So at the time, though, when Peter Navarro did circulate those memos, you were still downplaying the threat of coronavirus in the U.S. You were saying things like, I think it's a problem that's going to go away within a couple of days.
It will go away.
You said within a couple of days, the cases would be down to zero.
Well, the cases really didn't build up for a while.
All right, so I'm going to kind of cut in here and there so I can better explain what it is that I'm talking about. He did a few things here. First off, saying that it's going to go down to zero is not the same thing as it not rising for a while. Second thing, when he said that he was right about it going away, he was denying the fact that he was downplaying it earlier. All right. Thirdly, he can't even make that claim. To say that it's going to go away, Dr. Anthony Fauci has said numerous times that one of their biggest concerns is whether or not this is going to be a reoccurring thing that's going to come back each season. So let's take a look at what else he had to say.
But you have to understand, I'm a cheerleader for this country. I don't want to create havoc and shock and everything else, but ultimately, when I was saying that, I'm also closing it down. I obviously was concerned about it because I closed down our country to China, which was heavily infected. I then closed it down to Europe. That's a big move, closing it down from China and then closing it down from Europe and then ultimately closing it down to the UK.
All right, so what he's doing here is something called doublespeak. That's where you take something unpalatable and you repackage it into something that sounds nicer. When he says something like, I'm cheerleading for America, really what he's saying is that I'm lying to you. But he tells us not to worry because while he's lying to the American people, he's doing what needs to be done in the background. He's doing serious things that need to be done, like closing off travel to this and that. So he's taking it seriously while he's telling us lies. In this next section, one of the reporters asks him, do you think it would be important for Peter Navarro to have brought that memo to you? And he says, no, it doesn't matter because I had the same feeling. Let's take a look.
You learned about the memo today?
I read about it maybe a day ago, 2 days ago.
Do you feel like someone among your staff or Peter Navarro himself should have told you about the memo earlier?
No. It was a recommendation. It was a feeling that he had. I think he told certain people in the staff, but it didn't matter. I didn't see it. But I did. I closed it down. I don't remember it even being discussed. We had a meeting where there were a lot of people. Most people felt they should not close it down, that we shouldn't close down to China. But I felt we had to do it. And that was at almost the exact same time as the memo.
So he said it doesn't matter because he was taking steps anyway. Then as you see, he shifts to something where he can give himself praise, where he kept saying that people kept telling him not to shut it down, but he did it, which was right. He did need to do it, but that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. In this next section, she asks him, if he had gotten it, would it have led to him making any different decisions? Then he goes on to talk about how good the memo was, and then immediately says, but I didn't read it. Let's take a look.
I don't think it would have changed because I did. I basically did what the memo said, and the memo was pretty good memo from the standpoint that he talked, I guess, I didn't see it yet.
He was saying that the U.S. warning that the U.S. could lose trillions of dollars and millions of lives.
Well, you're not going to lose millions of lives, but you'll lose plenty of money.
So I don't even know what that was. He's sitting there saying that he couldn't have done it any better, that he was doing exactly what the memo said, and that it was good from the standpoint of, I guess, I didn't read the memo. So how is it you're going to sit there and say that you did exactly what the memo said and that it was good, but then turn around seconds later and say that you didn't read the memo? It's just completely disingenuous. He's just flat out lying to everyone. In this next section, you're going to see him latch on to the first thing that this lady says, and then he doesn't listen to anything that she says after that. It's like his brain shuts off. So much so that after he addresses the first thing that she said, she has to go back and repeat the question because he didn't even hear it. Let's see.
Mr. President, you say this week will be very painful, very difficult, but a few weeks ago you say this was just like a flu. What have you learned?
I didn't say 2 weeks ago was a flu.
The question is, Mr. President, what
Excuse
have
me.
you learned that
Ready?
you could offer as an advice to foreign leaders who still are skeptical about this pandemic and who are against social distancing? What is your advice? What have you learned?
I said it was just like a flu. So the worst pandemic we ever had in this world was a flu.
So he completely ignores her question, and watch as he shifts to defending himself on his statement that it was just like the flu. He goes on to talk about how the flu of 1918 was really dangerous and how many people that it killed, when he knows that when he said that it was just like a flu, he was in no way referencing that flu. He was referencing the common seasonal flu that most people get. Let's see what else he has to say.
And it was called, you know that, it was in 1917, 1918. That was a flu, okay? So you could say that I said it was a flu, or you could say the flu is nothing to sneeze at.
And what can you offer as an advice to foreign leaders who are skeptical about this pandemic and who are against social distancing?
Well, I think there aren't too many of them. If you look throughout the world, and everyone, just about everyone that has practiced that is now closing up.
So, as you can see, he completely ignored her question. He goes on to talk about the UK and Sweden and how bad they're doing, but offers no advice whatsoever like she asked for. Then he follows up with that everyone's trying to copy us and do exactly what we're doing. Now, this next reporter asks him a question regarding hydroxychloroquine and tracking the side effects of this drug. Before she even has a chance to get the question out, he's already saying yeah. So I don't know what question he's answering because that's not the question that he was addressing. He goes on to talk about hydroxychloroquine and them using it, but he doesn't actually address her question. Let's watch him fumble through this.
With millions of pills of hydroxychloroquine donated, is there a plan or system in place to track the potential side effects?
When you saw
There
the
has
representative,
serious harm. So is there a plan to
is there a
track
plan?
the side effects?
The side effects are the least of it. You have people dying all over the place, and generally the side effects are really with the Z-Pack, having to do with the heart. The Z-Pack, that's the antibiotic, not with the hydroxychloroquine. So.
Okay, so he doesn't answer her question either, and I'm going to skip past this next part. He goes on to give a story about this lady in New York who sent her husband out to get it. Now, this is called anecdotal evidence. This is exactly what Dr. Fauci said is the only evidence for hydroxychloroquine working for coronavirus patients. It's not reliable. If I said that I went outside and I stubbed my toe, and you say, okay, well, everyone that goes outside is going to stub their toe, that doesn't follow. It's the same thing with this. Just because someone took it and they got better doesn't mean that everyone can take it and get better. We have to conduct studies before we can say whether or not this is something that's dependable. So he goes on to give that story. I'm going to cut past that, but then he starts addressing because she re-asks him if they are going to track the side effects, and he says no. Let's see.
Those side effects?
No. Doctors have to recommend it. I want doctors. I'm not a doctor. I'm just saying we hear great results. And some people say, let's go to a laboratory, let's test it for a couple of years. And we got people dying in this country and all over the world right now, not in a couple of years. They're dying as we speak. There are people dying. And I really think it's a great thing to try, just based on what I know. Again, I'm not a doctor. Keeps it away, keeps it out of your system. I don't know. But there's a lot of good examples. And, we have a 1,500 case study going in New York, and it's almost complete. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
So as you heard him say, they have a case study, but he doesn't want to wait on the results of that case study before people start taking it. He'd rather just go with his gut feeling on it, even though he's not a doctor. This next part is a little bit embarrassing. It's where he goes on to talk about mail-in ballots and how they're disgraced and how they're terrible, but then he's allowed to do it. This is called special pleading. This is when you say, no, this is a bad thing, no one should do it except for me. Let's take a look at special pleading.
So you were highly critical of mail-in voting, mail-in ballots for voting.
I think mail-in voting is
but
horrible.
you voted by
It's
mail
corrupt.
in Florida's election last month, didn't you?
Sure, I could vote by mail for that.
How do you reconcile
Because I'm
that?
allowed to. Well, that's called out of state. You know why I voted? Because I happen to be in the White House and I won't be able to go to Florida to vote. But let me just say,
Mailing within
well, there's a
state or
big
mailing
difference
outside the
between
state.
somebody that's out of state and does a ballot and everything sealed, certified, and everything else. You see what you have to do with the certifications. I think that mail-in voting is a terrible thing. I think if you vote, you should go. And even the concept of early voting is not the greatest because a lot of things happen. But it's okay. But you should go and you should vote. I think you should go and you should vote.
Okay, so that's a clear-cut case of special pleading. In this last clip, we're going to take a look at one of the reporters asking him a question about the accuracy of death counts in the United States and whether or not the lack of testing in certain places can have an effect on that. He goes on to say that he's pretty sure that he thinks that they've been accurate so far. When she reiterates that there is lack of testing in certain places and that could have an effect on the actual death count, he shifts it to say that other places are actually the ones that are misreporting. Let's look at this last clip.
Some states have had trouble with getting accurate death counts, particularly because of lack of testing or no uniform.
Did you see death counts?
Yes, because of lack of testing and no uniform system to put that into.
When you say death counts, I think they're pretty accurate on the death count. Somebody dies, I think the states have been pretty accurate.
No testing.
That's a big deal, what you're just saying. No, the death counts, I think they're very, very accurate. I do say this, I think if you look at China and if you look at some of these very large countries, when you talk about cases, number of cases, I would be willing to bet they have more cases than we do, but they don't do the testing like we do.
Well, guys, it was a wild ride, but I appreciate you watching my video. We took a look at about 5 different ways of being just disingenuous in this video. I think it's very important that we hold it, especially the president, accountable for the things that they say. We took a look at sidestepping questions, walking back your statements, double speak, special pleading, and pivoting to praise is what I call it. So thank you guys. This is Inspiring Inquiry. Please come back here for more videos like this, and we're going to be covering other stuff in the future.